the Hypostyle Hall. What this is essentially a columned hall. These are all kind of Greek words that we apply to architecture, classical architecture, and so, you know, these are technical terms that scholars use, but all it means is a hall with lots of columns in it that's holding up a roof. The purpose of columns was to hold a roof up. They didn't have technologies that allowed you to make a very long open space with a roof because of the weight of that material and the stress on it and so forth would make it very difficult. Basically, you could make a roof as long as a tree stalk or trunk. But if you put it in columns, you could make it bigger. So that's what they did. It's just an architectural feature of the way ancient architecture worked. Now, these columns were originally of wood and represented trees. They were symbolically the trees of the garden of God inside these temples. As Egyptian architecture progressed, they replaced the wooden columns with stone columns, and the wooden columns don't survive because they've rotted away a long time ago, so what we have left are, you know, the stone versions of this. But these hypostyle halls can be quite massive. This is one at Karnak. You can see these huge columns. These are, I don't know, 40, 50 feet tall. And you can see the structure of how they put the roof across these is basically putting stones across the columns, and therefore they had to be pretty close together in order to because a stone, if it's too long, will get stressed in the middle, it will crack and collapse. So you know, there's only a certain width you could do these things. All of these columns were at one time painted, and you can see the paint. This is from Edfu. Particular, you know, there's some of these temples are better preserved than others, and although the paint has faded, you can still see that everything was painted. So here it's unpainted, but it was at one time. It's just faded away. This is another version of the Edfu Hypostyle Hall. It's one of the best preserved. And so there are these big columned halls. Now in the Israelite temple, Solomon's temple, they called this the holy place. That is to say, there was an inner chamber, which was the Holy of Holies, this most sacred place, and then an outer chamber called the holy place. So it fulfills the same type of function. This was a place where you would come and do prayers, music, offerings. They would be, you know, you'd have a table in there and you'd put offerings of bread or wine or fruit or flowers or all sorts of different things. That they burn incense, things like that. That's what was done in these halls. And the images on the columns depict the king doing whatever was done in the place. So what you've really got here is a sequence of pictures showing you what was done. And here you can see the king is holding, this is the king here, he's holding up offering in his hand, and he's giving it to a god or a goddess who's kind of on the other side of the column. You can't see him there. But so each of these, the walls, the columns, they all depict the rituals that were done. So we get a pretty good idea of what was going on in these temples based on those drawings. Now, the temple ceilings tended to be astronomical. That is, they represented the heavens, and depicted on them were astronomical scenes. The sun, the stars, the moon, things like that. And so what you've got then in this building is a microcosm. Microcosm means a small-scale model of the world. Micro means small, cosmos means the universe or the world, and so you've got then this small model of it. They didn't model it like we do on Google Earth, where we attempt to represent geographical relationships. They modeled it by representing spiritual relationships. And so it's a different way to model the cosmos, but it's still a model. Do you see what I mean? So you've got to kind of push the idea of a geographical map out of your mind, because that's not the type of modeling they're doing. It's just like we can do geographical, or we can do, you know, population models where we show the world, but we show things with, you know, bigger or more, you know, different colors showing higher or lower populations. You see what I mean? So it's the same type of thing they're doing here, but in a spiritual sense. Are those papers back? Or so nobody wants these papers? Barry, Brandon, Mesa? So I throw them away, guys? What do you think? Who votes to throw them away? Nobody? No, well, I've got a few guys that are obviously getting A's here. Okay, now this is the roof of the Dendera temple. So underneath you see this type of stuff. But if you go up on top of the roof, this is what you see. And you can see a few holes here where they left to allow a little bit of light in. But obviously these temples were really dark inside. And that was part of the mystique. I went into a Tibetan temple once where it was pitch black. and I didn't have a flashlight, so I was just kind of wandering around. And in the back of the room were these monks doing this really weird chanting. And it was just a very, very eerie feeling to wander around trying to find your way in the dark and hear, this chanting going on. So you got to understand kind of the mystique of this place. Out here you can see the temenos wall we've talked about. That's the outer wall of the entire temple complex. But within the temple, you've got then this building, and on the roof of the building, there's a chapel here. You can see this is the stairway where you go down into the temple, and there's the size of a person. So these are obviously massive buildings. And up on top here, they did astronomical observatory. So it was a scientific observatory in one sense, but it was designed to determine the calendar, the holy days, all those types of things. So astronomy in its origins was a temple science designed to make sure that your temple was coordinated with the gods as manifest in the heavens. Does that make sense? So, but the origins of science derive from these temple observatories like this one. Now within the temple itself, on the ceilings, they often depicted astronomical signs. And this one, it's a really bad picture because of the angle and lighting and stuff. But it shows you what's called the Dendera Zodiac. And you can see it's a giant disc-shaped thing with various gods and figures and so forth. And it's on the roof of a building. It's about a fourth the size of this room here. So it's a pretty big drawing. Now here's a artist's drawing of what's on it. And you can see, first of all, it's a disc shape. And this is probably related to the hypocephalus, which is also a microcosmic drawing. The hypocephalus being figure 2 in the book of Abraham. But that's another story. Here you can see gods. What are these gods doing? They're supporting, they're holding the disc of heaven up. So these are the pillars of the earth, these gods who hold the heavens. Remember the story of Atlas, the Greek god who has to hold the universe on his shoulders? That's the type of thing that we're talking about here. So, and they're gods of the quarters. You see it's divided into 4 here. So these are the directional gods. And then within this disc, you see all these different figures that are the constellations. And you can see that they're meant to be stars because they have star signs by them. See, I mean, there's little star signs all over. Now, this is an interesting one because it comes from about 200 BC, after the Greeks had conquered Egypt. So you have an inner circle in which the Egyptians have inserted the Greek zodiac, which is, what we know. Like here's Sagittarius, Scorpio, Leo. These are the different signs of the Greek zodiac that we still, many of you probably know what your sign is. This is based on ancient paganism. So when you talk about your sign, you're worshiping pagan god of your birth and all that type of stuff. But on the outer rim are the Egyptian constellations, which are called the decans, because they had 30 of them divided, according to the days of the month and so forth. So anyway, this is, the way astronomical signs work. So if you look at the temple here, here's the hypostyle, or the outer hall, the holy place. And then inside here is the Holy of Holies. And then notice there's a whole bunch of small rooms around the Holy of Holies. What was in those rooms? Well, it tells you over here. I mean, it lists the purpose of each of these rooms. Some of them were shrines to other gods. For example, number 14, the shrine of Sokar. Okay, and so different gods had their own little shrine. So the main god, Hathor, is worshipped here, but other gods get their points as well. But then other ones are work rooms where they store things, they change their clothes, they keep the temple treasure, they keep the equipment they need to run the temple, whatever it might be. Now, did the Israelite temple have this? Yeah, they had, but it was different. They had the Holy of Holies, and rather than have these rooms connecting to it, they were on the outside, and access to it was to the outside. But when you read carefully the description of Solomon's temple, it's like this, with the Holy of Holies here and the holy place here, and then around it are all these rooms. There's actually 2 stories of them that served exactly the same function. But they didn't have any direct access into the temple. You accessed them from the outside. But, they had the same type of functionality to these rooms. Lots of corridors and chambers within these, and you can see this. I mean, just gives you a sense of what the temple's like. And then you can see this piece of stone here, which was a grated stone that permitted light to come in. So it's kind of an early window. We talk about windows, we always think of them as glass, but the earliest windows were wood or You know, they could be leather, they could be anything. So, you know, you get a sense of that there. Now, once you got into the temple, if you were a priest, you had to go through special rituals in order to prepare yourself to be worthy and purified so that you could serve the god and worship the god. These rituals symbolically represent transformation, spiritual transformation of your nature into a more pure, more spiritual being. These rituals included purification, which was essentially washing the body and cleaning up. So, I mean, you know, it's just like getting a 3-year-old to clean up before they come to dinner. You got to clean up before you go see the god and feed the god dinner. So it's a washing, purification ritual. Then there's anointing, which is with oil and sometimes perfumed oil. And this was essentially part of this purification. Then you put on special clothing. There were all sorts of special robes you had to wear when you did different rituals. Sometimes you wore one set of clothing for one ritual, then you changed and had a different one for a different ritual. And then finally there are some crowning things going on associated with deification and so forth. So you'll get, you know, jewelry or crowns or things like that that represent change in status and transformation from one state to another. Okay? So those types of things are going on quite a bit. Now, this is from the Temple of Komombo, and this is the priest's robe room where they would go in and change their robes and do those types of preparation. You can see the temple's in pretty bad shape. How do we know that this room was designed for that? Because you got little inscriptions here that survive, and it, you know, tells you what's going on, so you can kind of figure out what's happening there. So, like I said, these side rooms that were around the temple had different functions. So this one was you purify and change your robes in this room. Another room might have a statue of Isis. Just depends on, you know, each one had a different function. Yes?
There's a ton of writing everywhere. Was the general population pretty literate?
No, this is writing that is for the gods, and it describes what you do in the rooms. You know, how you worship Isis in this room or whatever it might be. The priests essentially had a monopoly on writing, at least in the early times. Literacy was a few percent, maximum maybe 10%. When you get down into Greek times, it's probably increased to 20%, something like that. So it varies throughout time. Only the wealthy, the elites, you know, so it was much more limited than now. Why is that? Number one, because the system is very hard to learn. It's much more difficult than learning English. Number two, most of the people were too poor and, you know, just didn't have enough wealth, subsistence level. You don't have enough time, spare time to learn to read and write. And number three, books were very expensive, and so even if you could learn to read and write, if you didn't have enough money to buy books, you know, why do it? You know, these were all handwritten manuscripts written on papyrus. It's very expensive. You know, you can buy a paperback novel for the equivalent of an hour of minimum wage labor, right? To get that same paperback novel in ancient Egypt would have required months, you know, 4 or 5 months of, you know, high-paying job for somebody to copy it. Do you see what I'm saying? Because, you know, somebody would have to copy it out by hand, and that person's literate, very, you know, a very skilled person, require lots of money, just very expensive. Okay, here's some of the purification rituals that are depicted on the side. This is a panel on the side of the Holy of Holies of the Temple of Karnak, the central shrine of Amun, and it shows the king and going through these purification rituals in preparation for entering into the presence of God, which in practical terms means going into the Holy of Holies and venerating the statue and giving offerings to the statue. I mean, that's what was really going on. But, you know, symbolically it represents this. So here you've got the king. You've got these two gods here. This is Horus. This one is Thoth. They have little vessels or jars in their hands, and they're pouring out things on the king. And this little squiggly line, this sign in Egyptian, means water or liquid. Okay? And it represents kind of the waves of the Nile or something like that. You know, wavy water that's flowing, and that's what you've got here, these signs. Okay? Now in this one, you can see the king is in the same situation, same gods, but they are now crowning him, putting on, you know, necklace and stuff as he is getting prepared to go into the presence of God. So once you've gone through that purification ritual, you then enter into a chamber in which is an altar. And on the altar you make offerings. That is to say, you place bread, wine, fruit, flowers, incense. Could be lots of different things, even like a gold necklace or something you might put there. And these were given to the gods. And so there's a statue of the god, and in front of that is this table, and you make offerings on that table. You place the offerings. And as you do, there are priests who are singing songs, there are special prayers that you say, but this is the fundamental ritual of the day. And at the same time, you might go to the statue and purify the statue, wash it with water, pour oil on it, dress it with robes or wrap scarves and things around it. And this is still done today in India. You can go see these types of rituals done at Hindu temples, where they, literally will clothe the statue and wash it and anoint it and clothe it as if it were a human being or, the real person. Somebody have a hand up? Yeah.
Yes. So on the offerings, is there something like an amount they're expected to offer, or like a certain value to the item they offer?
Yes, they frequently say you must offer 10 loaves of bread at this time, and they'll outline exactly how much you're supposed to bring. On the other hand, when the king did it, sometimes he'd just offer tons and tons and tons, just overwhelming offerings. So it just depends. Yeah?
The Egyptians ever do human sacrifice?
Yes, there's some evidence of that. However, they didn't do it inside the temple. This was done out in the outer courts, and basically what it was is execution of war prisoners. Yeah?
And so all those offerings were just taken by the priests then?
Well, it depends on what it is. Like incense is just burned up. Flowers, they wilt and, fade away. But much of the time, some of the offerings are burnt, put in a fire and just burnt to a crisp. And then other times, the offerings would be eaten by the priests. So frequently, they'd take a bit, like they'd have a wine offering. They'd pour some on the ground or in a basin, and that would be for the god. Then they would drink the rest, and they are sharing it with the god. Then it's a shared meal. Notice an interesting thing about this altar table is that sign right there. What's that? Is that an Egyptian hieroglyphic? That is a Christian cross. Egypt was converted to Christianity in the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, and as it did, the temples were shut down. They were either abandoned or shut down, and the Christians often moved in, exorcised the demons in the temple, which means they drove out the spirits of the pagan gods who they thought were demons. They defaced the images so that the spirit wouldn't be attracted to the image. And then they christened them by making Christian signs. They'd paint the walls and put crosses in it. And then they would use them as churches. So this altar was originally used for the Egyptian offerings to the Egyptian gods. The Christians carved a cross into it, turned it into an altar, and offered the Eucharist or the Mass there. And many of these ancient temples were refurbished then and used as Christian ones. And some of the temples you can see plaster that has been painted over. They've plastered over the images of the Egyptian gods and then painted Christian images. And sometimes you can still see the remains of the paint and the plaster that the Christians had put on top of that. Here's an offering table that lets you see what they were like a little bit. It's a drawing of one. So you can see the table here. And on it you can see some fruit, a piece of fish, a jar of wine or something. And then they're pouring out wine or oil or water on top of this, which is it's a drink offering basically. You're offering liquids. Here's some pieces. These round things are probably pieces of bread and so forth. So this is all piled up on this table as they worship the god. And then they will be praying and saying prayers as they do this. Another thing to note is that the Holy of Holies is essentially symbolically the same as the central tomb of a pyramid. Now this is the pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's got this corbelled arch, which is a way to make an arch without knowing the principle of the true arch. It's a very interesting engineering feat here to make an open space. Here is me as a young guy with a beard when I was in Egypt 20 years ago or whatever. Probably more like 30 years ago, actually. I'm getting to be old. It's very sad. But what did the guy do in the tomb? Don't get old, guys. Just little advice. Don't do it. What did the king do in this tomb? What was the purpose of this tomb chamber? The king's body, remember, is to be resurrected. He is to go and enter into the presence of God and be taken up into heaven and become a god. Then dwell with the gods, right? We talked about that in the pyramid text. So the purpose of the tomb is a place where you can encounter God. The purpose of the Holy of Holies is the place where you encounter God. But you do so as a living being. So the functionality of these chambers symbolically is related here as well. Now here you can see, this is King Tut, excuse me, not Tut, Tutmosis. He is standing before the temple making an offering. He's got these ritual objects in his hands. Notice his hands and face have been chiseled away probably by the Christians who are defacing these to drive out the demons. And he's got two obelisks which were built in front of the temple. And then over here you have all these rooms filled with treasure. Okay? So you've got, these are probably incense or something like that. These are golden necklaces you put around your neck. There might be weapons, there might be tables, all sorts of stuff. Okay, so in the side chambers there were kept treasures which had been dedicated to the god. Okay? Yes?
Did they chisel out some of the writing?
Yes. Yeah, so you can see there, and there. They probably chiseled out the name. And when the early Christians came, they were still pagan priests, and they more or less knew at least, general things about hieroglyphics. And you can tell where the name of the king is because it's in a cartouche. That is that's kind of what a cartouche looks like. It's a circular oval around the name. And so they probably chiseled out the names thinking it was the name of some god or something. So the Holy of Holies then is the innermost chamber of a temple. It is the most sacred place. It is of limited access only to the high priest, the king, maybe some elite people. It contains an image of the god in ancient Egyptian temples. Now, was there an image of the god in Solomon's temple? Was there an image of the Lord? No. That was one of the unique things about Israelite religion, is they didn't keep an image of the god. And when the Greeks and Romans encountered the Jews and they learned that they didn't have an image of God in their temple, they often said they're atheists because they don't really believe in God. They just pretend to believe in God, but if you go in their temple, there's no image, so they really don't believe in God. So they can see this is a very weird thing that the Jews were doing. And then they had an ark, which is a mechanism to carry the image of God in it. Now, it's not, ark in Hebrew means box in this sense. But these arks were miniature boats. I'll show you a picture of them in just a second. Those were often in the Holy of Holies. So here is the inner shrine. This is the Holy of Holies of the Karnak temple in Luxor. And you can see here this table, which probably had the ark or the miniature boat to carry the god's image in. And then behind that is this shrine. This is where the god's statue was kept. The god's statue was standing here. There were wooden doors that were in front of it. And you can see the recess here where the wooden doors were. And they could open and close these doors, but the image of the god was standing there. So they'd sometimes close it, and when they go into prayer, make an offering, they'd open it. Here's a better picture of one of these shrines. You can see in here would have been the statue of the god. Okay. Now this is you see this pedestal here? That's essentially this thing here. And on it you can see a miniature boat. Now by miniature, this is probably 6 to 8 feet long. And on it there is a shrine box, which is essentially the same as this, only it's a miniature one. So they seem to have had a big statue of the god, then also smaller ones, maybe this big, that they could carry around. And what they would do is, if the god wanted to leave the temple and go on procession to visit his people, which is to say they'd have a big parade, all the people would come and venerate, they'd put the image of the god in this box, and they'd close it, cover it with cloth, and then carry it on their shoulders using these poles. You can see the poles right here that the priests are carrying. This is scene one where the ark is or the bark is in the temple. Here they're carrying it out on their shoulders. So this sacred bark is essentially a miniature boat, and on the Nile they'd have real boats and they'd sail around with the image of the god on these boats. But to move it around on land, they had these miniature boats. Here's a restoration of one. This is, some archaeologists just rebuild it based on those pictures of what they think it looked like. So you can see the box, the shrine box here, and then they'd carry it around. Here's a statue of Amun that survives. This particular statue was found at Karnak, but it was buried underground. And they think in the 660s BC, when the Assyrians attacked Egypt, the Egyptians started to panic, and they took a bunch of the temple treasure and buried it under the pavement floors of the temple, and then covered it up, and the Assyrians never found it. The archaeologists discovered it about 100 years ago, and so you have this, remains of this temple treasure, including this statue of Amun. This would have been the thing kept in those shrines we looked at. Mostly they're empty now. I mean, they've long been plundered. Here's a larger image of a god that were kept on pedestals. This one, the head's been busted off, probably intentionally. Again, we talked about defacing as a way to desacralize these temples. Now, this is from Angkor Wat in Cambodia. This is to show you what these images would have been, how they would have been treated when they, were worshipped. This image in itself is kind of interesting. Cambodia is Southeast Asia. Angkor Wat is the biggest temple complex in the world. And it's got, 20 or 30 different temples in it. In the old days, the Cambodians worshipped the Hindu gods, and this is a statue of Vishnu. But they converted to Buddhism in the 14th, 15th centuries AD, and now they worship, they're Buddhists. And so this statue is now said to be the Buddha, and they clothe it with Buddhist robes and so forth. And then I should have taken this picture a little wider angle, but down here is a basin or a plate on which are a bunch of flowers and offerings that they're making. Fruit and flowers and rice, I think, was on this plate down here. But this is exactly how the image of the god would have been treated by the Egyptians. Clothed, they sing to it, they talk to it, things like that. Now, when you enter the presence of God, symbolically, this is what happens. And we call this a presentation scene, where the king is presented before the god, or sometimes a human is presented before the king. You'll have an enthroned figure who is the figure with power and authority, and other people then being presented before him in acts of veneration or honoring the person on the throne. So in this case, it's the king being presented to the gods. Other cases, it'll be humans being presented to the king. But the ritual structure of the scenes are very, very similar. So here you've got the king. You've got two goddesses here who are taking him by the hand and are going to bringing him along. They're passing by guardians and so forth, and they're leading him into the presence of God. When you meet the god, you do a sacred embrace, which is done here. You can see the god Amun-Re here. He's got the Ankh, symbol of life, which he's going to give the king eternal life. This is a funerary scene. Here is the king who is embracing the god. He's giving him a big hug, right? This embrace means that the king is accepted as a part of the family of the gods. He's accepted into the community of gods. He now has kinship with the gods. He's becoming a god. Also in these scenes, there's frequently a tree of life scene. It's called the Ishid tree in Egyptian. And basically there's fruit on this tree, and the king will eat the fruit with the gods and then become, gain eternal life by eating this fruit. Okay? So this is tree of life or Ishid tree scenes. Yes?
When a new pharaoh would come in because they believed that they were gods, how did they become gods? Did they just go through the temple in this process here?
Well, yes, there was a big coronation ritual in which the pharaoh was essentially crowned king and accepted as God. So the new pharaoh, the belief was that the spirit of God would go into him, fill him, he'd become godlike. For example, when Alexander the Great conquers Egypt, he goes to the Siwa oasis where the great shrine of Amun was. This is out in the western desert. And he is taken before the high priest, and the high priest declares him to be the son of God. So he's deified in this ritual at this temple. And then even though he's not Egyptian, he's Greek, he's conquered Egypt, he is now the pharaoh, he's now the king of Egypt, so he's now the son of God. Does that make sense? So it's part of the coronation, basically. Okay, here's the scene then. You can see a tree in the background here, all the leaves and stuff on this. Here is the god Amun-Re seated on his throne. Here is Ramses. I believe this is Ramses II's scene. He now has the Ankh sign in his hand, so he has eternal life. He's got a smaller throne. It seems to be in front, but this is the way Egyptians do perspective. It's supposed to be by the side, so he is enthroned at the side of God. Here's a goddess, and they are writing. See these little styluses? Here's the fruit. They're writing on the fruit. Here's a close-up of that scene. Here's the god, and he's writing the name of Ramses on the fruit. here's a goddess doing the same thing on the fruit. So these are the pieces, and you can see the tree, the leaves and stuff and branches of the tree in the background. They're writing the name of the king on the fruit of the tree of life, and then he can eat this. He's deified in that regard. So this is Ramses in the afterlife, enthroned by the side of God, gaining eternal life. He has the Ankh symbol in his hand. He's getting this fruit, things like that. Now, the Egyptians would also take the gods on processions. These were on special holy days, festival days, pilgrimage days. They would remove the statue from the Holy of Holies. They'd place it in a miniature temple that is on this miniature boat or bark. They call them barks. And they are carried by the priests on their shoulders, just like the Ark of the Covenant was. And then they can carry them in big parades and processions, and the people will come and gather and worship and pray and sing and have big celebrations because they can look at the god. Now, they actually don't see the image. The image is inside that shrine, generally covered with cloths, but they know the image of the god is in their presence. But this all occurs outside the temple. So these are big public processions that they do. Here you can see all the priests carrying with their big robes and stuff, and they're carrying the image, the boat on their shoulders, and then here's the shrine in which the image of the god was kept. And here is the king who is offering offerings to the image as it is carried in procession. And the interesting thing, the interesting thing about this is that he's got a little ladle here, like a big spoon, and he's holding it in his hand, and the ladle is actually a cupped hand. The hand is cupped like that, in which is a little basin, and they had the incense in this, and they would pour it out. So he's holding a miniature hand that's cup shaped so it can hold the incense that is then poured on a fire or something as it's given to the god. Here's some books on this type of stuff if you want to pursue it.